All right, from number 7, we're supposed to find all the roots and solve this completely. And so we go back to our oral exercises where we actually listed all the possible roots for number 7. And so I've written those out here. They're plus or minus 5, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 5 halves, and plus or minus a half. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these roots to do some synthetic division and try to break it down. And if we ever get to a point where we can figure out how to do it without synthetic division, we usually stop because usually factoring is quicker than synthetic division. Okay, so here we go. If you look at this, do we have all our terms? We have a cube, a square, x to the first, and then our constants. So we don't have any missing terms here, so we copy down our coefficients. And I always start with plus or minus 1. If positive 1 doesn't work, I go to negative 1. So that's what I'm going to do here, just because it's usually, you know, usually the book's nice to you, and it's a good place to start anyway. I don't want to start with a fraction. I don't know about you. So drop down the 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 7 plus 2 is 9. 1 times 9 is 9. 6 and 9 is 15. 1 times 15 is 15. Okay, that's going to add up to 10. That one didn't work. Let's try negative 1. Sometimes if 1 doesn't work, negative 1 isn't, and it's that far off, sometimes negative 1's not going to work either, but let's just see. We never know. So drop down your 2. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. 7 and negative 2 is 5. Negative 1 and 5 is negative 5. 6 and negative 5 is 1. Is that right? Yeah. 5 is negative 5. 6 and negative 5 is 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. That one didn't work either because that adds to negative 6. So we know that negative 1 didn't work. Plus or minus 1. Let's try plus or minus 5. And then if we can't figure anything out, we'll go to doing the fractions. So we're going to do let's see, we rewrite our coefficients down. 2, 7, 6, and negative 5. And this time I'm going to do positive 5. Bring down your 2. 5 times 2 is 10. 7 and 10 is 17. Ooh, this isn't looking good. 5 times 17 is 5 here, 85. That would be 91 if you add it together. 5 times 91 is a huge number. It's not going to add to 0. This one's not going to work either. So let's try negative 5. Okay, so we write down our coefficients again, and we drop it down. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. 7 and negative 10 is negative 3. Negative 5 and negative 3 is positive 15. 6 and 15 is 21. Negative 5 times 21 is negative 105. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, so this means we're going to have to go to our fractions. Let's write these down. And if you remember, the fractions that we have to try are 1 half and 5 halves. I'm going to go with a half first, okay? So drop down your 2. A half times 2 is 1. 7 and 1 is 8. A half times 8 is 4. 6 and 4 is 10. A half times 10 is 5. And negative 5 and 5 is 0. Yes, we found one of our roots. One of our roots is a half, okay, or one of our solutions. Now, what I'm going to do now is take these numbers and see. We started with the cube, so now we go down to a square. This is 2x squared plus 8x plus 10, right? Yes. And let's see if we can factor this. If you notice, first of all, there's a GCF. So let me pull a GCF of 2 out. What we have left is x squared plus 4x plus 5. Now, I'm thinking I must have done something wrong with the synthetic division, because you would have thought it would have worked, because this looks like this is going to factor to x plus 1, x plus 5. So I must have done something on wrong with my synthetic division, because look at this. Oh, is that going to work? Wait a second, that doesn't work, because you're thinking what multiplies to give you 5 and adds to give you 4? Well, the only thing that gives you 5 is 1 and 5, and it's a positive 5, so you can't do anything to get it. So actually this does not work. Okay, I thought maybe I had done something wrong with my synthetic division. So what do we do now? Factoring didn't work. We can do the quadratic formula. So we've got 1 root of a half, and now we've got x squared plus 4x plus that we could use the quadratic formula on to solve. Okay, I still think that's easier than going back through. Well, here's the other thing. All we're getting with that list are the real solutions. We're not getting any imaginary ones, and this one might have some imaginary ones. So let's go see. what's going to happen here. We go x equal negative b. Remember, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. So our a is going to be 1, our b is going to be 4, and our c is going to be 5. So x equal negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's go plug in x equal negative b. B is 4, and there's a b here. A is 1, and there's an a there and an a there, and c is 5. Okay, so let's just see what this simplifies to. Now that's negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 20. Aha, these are all we've got left are imaginary roots. That's why we weren't finding anything when we were doing so much of that synthetic division before. So this is negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 over 2. Alright, so that's negative 4 plus or minus. Now if you remember the square root of negative 4, we can think of that as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 4. So it's going to be 2i, because the square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 4 is 2, all over 2. Now 2 divides out of every single term there, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide 2 out of every term. So let's see, 2 goes into there twice, it goes into there once, it goes in there once. So I get negative 2 plus or minus 1i over 1. So it's just negative 2 plus or minus I. So my solutions are a half. We found that one with synthetic division. And then we took the result of that, and we ended up having to do the quadratic formula, and we got negative 2 plus or minus I. And those are our solutions to number 7. So you can see how you start with synthetic division to break stuff down, and then you can use other tools. Synthetic division never would have gotten us these other two answers, so we had to turn to something like the quadratic formula. I'm going to try to do 9, or as much of it as we can. If the video cuts off, I'll just leave on here whatever's there. I'm not going to worry about finishing it up. Okay, so let me write it. All right, if you look back up at number 9 in the oral exercises, these were the possibilities for all the roots we could find, and we're hoping that we don't have to go to the fractions, but let's start our synthetic division, and we'll just start with something. I'm going to start with the 1s, and I'm going to go to the 2s, and I'm going to go to the 3s. Okay, I write down my coefficients: 2, negative 11, 16, and negative 6. Okay, so I'm going to start with 1. Drop down my 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Add that up, that's negative 9. 1 times negative 9 is negative 9. 16 and negative 9 is 7, and 1 times 7 is 7. That did not have a remainder of 0. It's like a 1, so that one didn't work. I'll put a red line through it to show it didn't work. Now I'm going to try negative 1. I always just start with the integers. So 2, negative 11, 16, negative 6. Drop down your 2. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Negative 11, negative 2 is negative 13. Negative 1 times negative 13 is a positive 13. That's going to be 29. Negative 1 times 29 is negative 29. It really doesn't matter what that adds up to because it's not 0, so that one's not going to work either. I'm going to go to 2 next, and then I'll try negative 2 if that one doesn't work. Okay, so we copy down our coefficients again. Okay, so we drop down our 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Negative 11 and 4 is 7. 2 times 7 is 14. 16 and 14 is 30. 2 times 30 is 60. Okay, that didn't work because that's going to be like 54, not a 0. I really don't care what's there. I just need it to be, if it's not a 0, I don't really care, do I? So I don't, I'm not gonna, sometimes I don't even take the time to add those up. Let's try negative 2 and see if it works. I'm going to do as much as I can on this page. So you can see how this sometimes takes a while, because if you don't pick the right one the first time, you're just going to have to keep going till you find it. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Negative 11 and negative 4 is negative 15. Negative 2 times negative 15 is a positive 30. You add that together, you're going to get, what, 46, and negative 2 times 46 is like negative 98. It is not going to be 0 either, so 2 is not working for me either. I'm going to go to 3 next. Okay, so let's go to a new sheet. Negative 11, 16, negative 6. Okay, so now I'm going to try 3. I wish I had not picked red to write with. Drop down the 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Negative 11 and 6 is negative 5. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. 16 and negative 15 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Not 0. That one didn't work. Let's try negative 3 next. Okay. And then I'll go to 6. I'm going to do all my whole numbers before I go to those fractions. Drop down a 2. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 11 and negative 6 is negative 17. Negative 3, negative 17 is 51. And it doesn't look like this one's going to work either. Because when I multiply negative 3 times 67, it's not going to be positive 6. So those didn't work. Let's try 6. Okay. 6 times 2 is 12. Negative 11 and 12 is 1. 6 times 1 is 6. 16 and 6 is 22. 6 times 22 is like 132. Not going to work. Let's try negative 6. Okay. 2, negative 11, 16, negative 6. Drop down your 2. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. Add that up. That's negative 23. Negative 6 and negative 23 be a positive 138. You can tell this is not going to work either. So we go, okay. Now we're down to going to the fractions, okay? So fractions on this one were 3 halves and 1/2, I think. 3 halves and 1/2. Okay, so we're going to have to do plus or minus 3 halves, plus or minus 1/2. I'm going to try a half first, okay? And again, we may run out of time on this, but this is the process you would do. 2, negative 11, 16, negative 6. Okay, brought down your 2. A half of 2 is 1. Negative 11 and 1 is negative 10. A half of negative 10 is negative 5. 16 and negative 5 would be 11. A half of 11, not going to be 6. That one didn't work. Let's try negative 1/2. It's probably going to be the last one I try. This is why you like synthetic division, but you really don't want to have to do it too much. Negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1. Negative 11 and negative 1 is negative 12. Negative 1/2 times negative 12 is a positive 6, right? Yeah. 16 and 6 is 22. Negative 1/2 times 22 is negative 11. Didn't work. Let's try 3 halves. Okay, we try this. I hope, and the thing about it is, if I've made a little mistake somewhere on my multiplying and my adding, I could have already passed the correct one. So I'm not looking at the answer key right now, so I don't know what the answer is. 3 halves times 2 would be 3. Negative 11 and 3 is negative 8. 3 halves times negative 8 is going to be a negative 12, right? Yeah. 16 and negative 12 is negative 4. 3 halves times negative 4. 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in there twice. That would be negative 6. Negative 6 and negative 6 is negative 12. Hey, that didn't work, but you know what? Negative 3 halves might. So I'm going to try to squeeze it in down here. And, of course, this is the last one I'm trying, right? Okay. Drop down your 2. Negative 3 halves times 2 is negative 3. Negative 11 and negative 3 is negative 14. Okay, let me come over here and do a little figuring. 3 halves times 14. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive, but let's just see. 3 times 7 is 21. That would be 37. That's not going to work either. It's not even going to give me... Okay, so I cheated. I went to the back of the book because I went through all of them and didn't find the answer. And the back of the book says that 3 halves work. So let's go back and look at this, because I must have messed something up right here. And that's the bad thing about this. It can happen. You bring down your 2. 3 halves times 2 is 3. Negative 11 and 3 is negative 8. 3 halves times negative 8 is negative 12. 16 and negative 12 is not negative 4. It is a positive 4. That's where I messed up right here. And then 3 halves times 4 would be positive 6, and this would be 0. Okay, so we have our 0. It is